Welcome, welcome, welcome to Eagle Lock. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have a special guest with me, Coach Michelle, one of our amazing coaches here. I'm Coach Art, and we are going to be doing a training based on the college interview. The reason why it's so timely right now is because a lot of the students have submitted their applications and a lot of the schools now are going and extending invitations to do invites. Okay. And so I thought it was timely to be able to provide some insights on how to best prepare for your college interview. I also have Coach Michelle here, who has actually gone on a college interview. So she's going to give us her insights at the end here. So thank you, Michelle, for joining us. Appreciate it. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. And what we're going to cover is one, how to prepare before the interview. Okay, because that's really, really important. What to do during the interview, what to do after the interview, some just brief tips for the interview itself, pro tips. And then, of course, we'll talk to Coach Michelle about her experiences with her college interview. Okay. So, one of the things with anything, right, it is the best thing to do if you want to do well in whatever you're doing is to prepare. And so we talk about how to prepare for your interview. And first of all, I always say is, well, why interview? So there's a couple things. First of all, a lot of times the interviewer that is going to interview you is a alumni of the school. Okay. They're the best representatives to assess if the candidate that they are interviewing is in line with the culture and the type of student that they're looking for based on their personality and based how they, on how they talk with you, talk to the interview. Okay, they are really looking beyond what is in your application. Okay, there's a committee and there's readers that are reading your application. This is an extra step for them to be able to really find out because those readers and that committee, they don't have a chance to talk to you personally, but the interviewer does. And they're assessing the communication skills, your enthusiasm, and really your alignment with the school's values. Okay. So it gives the opportunity for you as a candidate, if you're interviewing, to express your interest with the school, to ask the questions of the interviewers, and really determine, the right fit. Because the interviewer is seeing, are you the right fit? But you're also can find out if you are, if they're a right fit for you as well. Okay, because they'll give you that perspective, okay, about the school. So first things first, when you go ahead and you're getting ready for the interview, you want to research the college, okay? Now, I know you probably have done this for the application process, but again, this is just a more in-depth research and, to be familiar with the mission and values that that college, abides by. You want to understand why that college. Okay. So you want to really research what are the aspects of that college that you love that are in line with your values and your goals. You want to explore the fit and you want to understand that when you and that college are put together, that makes a super person, right? And you want to understand why that is the case, what that fit is, and to be able to express that well. And also, I always say is try to get the contact information of your interviewer. And the only reason why is because you're going to send them something at the end of the interview, after the interview. And so you want to be ready. But also, I always like to research who is going to interview me. So if you have their name, you want to look at their background. You want to see what they're doing because those are points of information that you could use in the questions that you have, or possibly kind of deduce the type of questions they may ask or the type of person that they are, right? Okay. So you can get that, look on LinkedIn or do a search on their name. There's usually a lot of information about the person and I would hope that you have their name because normally that you would. Okay. Now, the next thing is make sure that you review your application. Now, I know that you probably have done your application already. Of course, you have because you've submitted it. but be prepared to discuss, your personal statement, your activities, and you want to make sure that you reflect on what makes you unique, okay? Be prepared to talk about that. Be prepared to talk about why the originality of the person that you are, okay, and also within the context of the school. So it's important that you review your application itself. It's probably been maybe a month since you've seen it because you've submitted it a month ago. So just be familiar because that interviewer will have that information already, okay? So it's important you know what that is and you have it like you know it like the back of your hand, and you should because it's your stuff, right? Now, practice, practice, practice. Practice makes perfect. So, when you're thinking about your interview questions, you want to make sure is that you review some of the interview questions. For example, tell me about yourself. Why are you interested in the college? Tell me about a challenge you face and how you handled it. What are you passionate about? What are your career and academic goals? I was wondering, Michelle, when you were prepping, did you do any preparation with respect to, the interview questions that you might have possibly received?
Yeah, I think if you go online, a lot of schools will have like a sample interview list that
Yeah,
most people base those interview questions on. So it's
yeah,
really easy to prepare for it.
yeah. And how did you prepare for it? Did you kind of just, like I said there, talk in front of a mirror or have someone ask your questions, or how did you do that?
Yeah, I had my sister ask me questions and she gave me advice because she's gone through a lot of interviews before. And I
Okay,
also did some research on the person that was interviewing me because I knew who it
good.
was. And so figuring out what they were interested, if there was anything that I could say to them that would start a conversation, all of that really helped.
Beautiful, beautiful. One thing that I will say is don't memorize your answers. Okay. Remember, okay, let me take that back. You can memorize aspects of it, but don't memorize it to the point where it's verbatim and you sound like a robot because you're just repeating the answer to it. Because they're going to ask you something like similar to tell me about yourself or, why the college. But you don't want to just sit there and look like, oh, it's a set. It is more of a conversation. The more, and this is part of the slides I have, the more that you can make it a conversation back and forth and you can make the interviewer comfortable, the better your interview will be. Okay. So, preparing the questions that you ask of the interviewer is very, very important because you want to ask thoughtful questions. Maybe about the specific academic program, maybe the campus life and the clubs or community involvement, what kind of support they have. Typically, again, as we talked about, the interviewer is an alumni. So, you want to ask them about their experience when they were there. Okay. And if they have a similar major that they went to that's yours, that's great because then you guys can talk about, the maybe the interest that they had or so, or maybe even why they applied. I don't know, Michelle, do you remember a question that you maybe asked your interviewer when you were interviewed? Was there one question that you asked them that you recall?
Yeah, I think one of my questions were like, what were some of your favorite study spots? Or
Ooh,
I
that's a
know
good one.
about this program. Were you ever involved in it, or do you know anyone that was involved in it? Stuff like that.
Ooh, those are good ones. Everybody, you got to take notes on that because those are good questions. Okay. So those are really good questions. Okay. So again, prepare. Don't just go there and then when they finish interviewing you that you don't have anything ready. Okay, because then that shows disinterest. And you really want to make sure that you show that you're interested in what they're talking about. Okay. I can't say this enough. Dress appropriately. Okay. Please, please, please wear business casual. Again, formal attire is different. That depends upon whether where you're meeting and who you're meeting with and at where. But make sure your outfit is clean, neat, and professional. The key thing here is don't wear casual clothes. Don't wear a t-shirt and I mean shorts if you're wearing. Don't wear t-shirts and shorts if you're doing live. I mean going in front of the person, live. But even as you can see here, I have a nice polo and I have a nice sweater here because it's cold. Well, cold as much it can be in San Diego. But you can see there, Michelle, she's very well suited as well there. Dress appropriately, okay? You want to make sure is that you come off as professional and dressed appropriately. You can see the people there as well, the picture there. But you want to show that you're serious about what you're doing and that you're talking to them, and that dressing well is going to convey that professionalism to them. Know your logistics. Okay, so if you're going to be doing, and Michelle, did you do your interview in person or did you do it online?
Mine was all online.
Okay, all online. Okay. So I know I did one and it was in person, so I can kind of give you my, but I majority of the time now it's online because again, it just facilitates an easier way of doing things. But if you happen to be in person, one of the things that I always make sure that I advise my students is know your location, scope it out the day before, even if you're the person that maybe is very terrible at directions. Okay. Okay. I'm not very good at directions. Okay. I have to have my phone with me. But if you're not good, you want to know your location. If you have to scope it out the day before, plan your travel, make sure you're at least 10 to 15 minutes early. And make sure that's why if you go there the day before around the same time, then you can scope out what's the traffic look like? Where could I park? Okay, where do I sit? Where would I go? Um, More familiarity of the area is a good thing. Now, if it's a virtual interview, then first of all, the key thing is you want to test out your internet connection, camera, and microphone. That is absolutely a must. Okay. Because if you're dealing with issues with your internet connection and camera, or they can't hear you or they can't see you, not a good thing. And choose a quiet and well lit place. Okay. Michelle is a perfect example here. Well lit, can't hear anything from the background. So, make sure that it's a quiet and well lit place. Make sure that whoever is in the vicinity or your area, let them know that you're going to be doing an important interview and that they don't interrupt you or make any noise. Okay. All right. So that you've prepped for the interview, you're ready, you're dressed, you're ready to go, you're gonna get online, you're gonna travel there. Okay. So the interview comes up, what are you gonna do? First of all, making a positive first impression. Now, if you're meeting in person, greet them with a smile and have a confident handshake. Don't be shy, just be authentic. And you see the young lady there, she's greeting them with a smile, a nice firm handshake. Okay, be polite, be professional, and maintain good posture. Okay. Show enthusiasm, show that you're eager, show that that you want to be there. That's really, really important for a first impression. Okay. um so you meet the individual, you're going to sit down. And so the key thing here, and I can't tell you enough, is be yourself. Don't try to be somebody else. Okay. That's the one thing that does not work. If you're going to try to say, oh, I'm trying to be the person that that interviewer wants to be, there's no way you'll know that because you don't know who they are and you don't know what they're going to ask. So be yourself, share genuine stories and experiences that, support your answers. Show enthusiasm not only for the things that you have done in the past and you're passionate about, but also for the school and the programs that you're going to get involved in, okay? Avoid one-word answers. Yes, no, yeah, okay, yes. You got to elaborate on your thoughts, but also stay concise. Don't ramble. Okay, that's the one thing. Don't ramble on and on about useless things. Do it on relevant things based on the question. And I always do this exercise with all my students when I'm talking. Okay, so I want everyone to see this. Okay, so here I am. I'm gonna. If I'm on the, if you can notice it right away. Okay, if I'm sitting like this, okay, that doesn't show and convey any enthusiasm. Now look at the difference. You can automatically see the difference online, okay, especially online. Sit up in your chair when you're doing your interview, whether that's in person or whether that is online, okay? If you're in person, take a take a seat and don't rest your back on the chair. Sit forward a little bit, okay? 2 feet on the ground, right? Okay, 4 feet on the floor. I always talk about. So, okay. Now, Don't slouch. And again, as I mentioned, the best interview is when it isn't an interview, but it's rather a conversation. Okay. Anything on that, Michelle, when you interviewed, what were some of the tips that or some of the things that you noticed when you went on an interview?
Yeah, so I think one kind of weird piece of advice that someone gave me recently on doing interviews is almost treat it like a date. You're expressing
Mm,
yourself, you're being yourself, and you're
yeah,
conversing with this other person. And it's in both ways, you're trying to see if that school fits with you. And so, kind of like a date almost.
sure.
Um, and so feel free to ask questions as they're asking questions. Like you don't have to
Hmm.
save all your questions for the end.
That's
Sometimes it
true.
makes them feel at ease when they can like talk to you. And for
Right.
me, like my person was from California. And so she was from kind of around my area. So I got to ask questions about like what was the transition like to go from California to somewhere
Ooh,
super
very
cold.
good.
So like fun questions where you can connect with them was really good.
Love that. Awesome. That's great advice. Absolutely. And again, you doing your research on the individual allows you have to have those contextual pieces of information. Like you said, oh, they're from California. That's amazing because then now you guys have a connection there. Whenever you can find a connection with that person, that's great. Sometimes the only thing is that when you find that connection, don't go down the rabbit hole too much, where you talk and some because I've been in some interviews like to talk about those. Everybody likes to talk about each other, about themselves. So you don't want it to be where they dominate the interview, where they talk so much about themselves that they don't learn anything about you. So it is a give and take. You do want to have a conversation, but you don't want them to dominate the conversation. You want to make sure that you have conveyed a lot of things about yourself. So great, really great advice there, Michelle. Okay. Another thing, listen actively, right? Pay attention to the questions that they're asking. If you need to, it's okay to take notes, but don't get too preoccupied by taking notes. Okay. If that's like your safe zone and but you're constantly looking down, you're not doing that's too much. But take what I always like to do if I'm doing that is I write keywords down that will remind me of maybe something I want to ask a question about, right? And when you're answering a question, and this goes along with any interview that you do, take a moment to think before you answer if you need it. Okay. It's okay to pause. There's not a problem with pausing. One of the things that I do is, and a person that gave me this, say you can look up. Like sometimes you can look up, think. That's a normal thing people do, and then think of the answer. And then when you're ready, look directly at the interviewer and then answer the question calmly. Okay. So that's where an indication, but don't take too long, of course, but it's okay to pause. It's okay to think about their question because that also gives the interviewer respect because you really are listening and understanding. And as well, it's okay to even ask qualifying questions. If they say, if they ask you a question you don't understand, say, okay, I'm sorry, just if I can just clarify, do you mean this? And they say, oh, we mean this, then great, okay? Because it's better that you get a clarifying question so that you answer their question rather than it's something that's completely out of left field and it didn't answer the question at all. Okay. So that's listening actively. Now, professional etiquette, don't interrupt the interviewer. Okay. Let them finish. Now, sometimes this is a little difficult if they're a talker because they may talk, 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 talk. And so at that point, if they're a really talker and they are dominating the conversation, then you do need to insert yourself, but try to insert yourself strategically. Always stay positive. One of the things that a lot of people do is, they neglect to focus on their strengths, but sometimes rather than making excuses for your weaknesses, okay, don't go down the path of negativity, go down the path of positivity. Talk about the things that you've done well, okay? Focus on that. And if they do ask you about the weakness stuff, don't focus on the weakness. Just say, yeah, I'm a little bit disorganized, but tell them what you're doing about it and how you're resolving that and how you're moving forward, okay? But don't dwell on it, okay? If you are in person and you're at an eating place, I always recommend do not order anything messy. And I have a direct example of that. I remember my very first interview that I had. This was a long time ago, and it happened that it was a luncheon. He ordered, I didn't know how to order, so I ordered something, and it was there was what do you call it? Mashed potatoes that I had on my thing. And so unfortunately, I went to grab the mashed potatoes, and for some odd reason, something hit my hand or something, and the mashed potatoes went flying and it hit the guy. Okay. Now, he was very gracious. Suffice it to say, I didn't get the job, but I know that it's just not a good thing. So when if you do eat something, just order water, and take sips. Sometimes you can use that as a good calm your nerves factor, as well as just to take a sip really quickly, especially if they're drinking, coffee or whatever. So, okay. But I always try to avoid ordering something because you never know if you spill or something, and that just, that normally unnerves people. Okay. All right. For the interview, you want to make sure that you end on a very strong note. So, you want to first of all thank the interviewer for their time. Okay. You want to express that your continued interest in the college and the program. You want, of course, want to reiterate your enthusiasm for what the school offers. And if you don't have it, get their contact information. Usually, sometimes what they'll do is they'll give you your card even before you start. They're like, "Hi, I'm so and so. Here it is." So I'm curious for you, Michelle, when you completed your interview, were there certain things that you did or things that you remember that you did?
Yeah, so I think I emailed them after and was like, "Thank you for
Yeah,
speaking with me. If I have
awesome.
any questions, moving forward, I'll let you know." And I had like a really fun conversation with you.
Cool. Good.
Something like that.
Excellent. Cool. Um, okay. So, it's a perfect segue. So after the interview, you've completed the interview, you're calmed down now, you're relaxed, everything is cool. What do you do? Okay. So the first thing is like exactly what Michelle did. Email a thank you note within the 24 to 48 hours. You want to do it immediately. So one thing, and this was back in the day. Okay. This is back in the day. What I did is I always had a prepared written note if I knew their address and or so forth. And as soon as I was done with that interview, I would go to the mailbox and just drop it off. Okay. If that's something you want to do. Sometimes a personal note goes a long way if you handwritten it. And so that's just one of the things I had in my portfolio when I brought it. I would do it. That's another thing I didn't even mention is that if you do interview live with somebody, bring a portfolio with you. And I hopefully you guys know what a portfolio is. It's one of those leather bound types of portfolios where it has paper in it, so that you can carry certain things in it, and that's all you want to carry. A lot of times it's good because you can take that and you can put that on your lap, and that it's kind of a piece where you can hold on to it and it gives you a little bit more, assurance or so. But it also holds possibly information. Like if you have a resume, if you have examples of things that you're doing, then at least you're not fumbling with paper. It's in a portfolio, right? Okay. In your thank you note, mention specific points of conversation, which exactly, see, Michelle, you were right on, and reaffirm your interest in the school. So that's very, very important in the thank you note. Again, if it's an email, if it's a written note, um, you know, I think text would be okay as well. If you happen to get their phone number and they say it's okay with text as well, that's okay as well. Okay. One thing that I always say is reflections. Take notes on the questions that were asked of you and your responses, and think about areas where you can improve for future interviews. Because one of the things that we were always learning and growing. Okay, and so this may not be the singular interview, and you will be doing interviews even past your college interviews. The next thing is when you get into college, it'll be your internship interviews, or maybe it's grad school interviews, or a job interview, something like that, right? So always learn. And the one thing for me I know is practice makes perfect. One thing that I did because I always wanted to make sure that I could do well is I actually at the career center at the school, and this is maybe when you get into college, the career center at school, I would sign up for interviews. I would just sign up for interviews just so I can get used to it. Because the more you get used to doing it, the easier it will be. Okay. And especially at the high school level, you want to start getting used to talking to people because you're going to need to do that. Okay. So it's very, very important. Okay. Another thing is be patient. Okay. Interviews are really only one component of the admissions process. I will tell you, some of these interviews, do they get used? Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Okay. Um, it's sometimes it's a courtesy and sometimes it isn't. It depends. I have talked to a number of um, college recruiters, college admissions people, and it's 50-50 on whether they really tap into that. It's only when they really need some more background and are kind of iffy of whether you were there or not, then they will go to, let's say, okay, how was the the person interview, in-person interview or the person's interview, to get them over that hump. Okay. Okay. Um, let's see here. Okay. So tips for a successful interview, just at a high level. First of all, I've always mentioned be yourself. Colleges want to get to know you. They want to know the real you. The biggest thing when you're interviewing, we talked about this, is stay calm and confident. Take deep breaths if you feel nervous. Again, do a pause in between when you're answering a question. The biggest thing here is prepare for your interview. I can't say that enough because expect that you may have curveballs. I know, and this is one of the questions that I'm gonna ask you, Michelle, is maybe a curveball. I don't know if they ever did that, but is any unexpected questions, stay composed and think critically. Meaning, if you don't have no idea how to answer it, again, take a pause, think about it, and do the best you can to answer it, but don't get rattled. Okay. That's the one thing because the interviewers are not there to try to eliminate you. They really are not. They are there just to find out the kind of person that you are. Okay. And to see if it matches. They're on purpose not there to drill you and to try to make you feel nervous and everything else. They just want to see who you are, right? Again, follow up professionally, always build a positive impression, be prompt and respectful, and be prepared. Educate yourself on school and the interviewer themselves. Okay. So I know Coach Michelle, I've asked you a couple of questions, but I'm gonna kind of go backwards there. Um, so first of all, I'm gonna actually let me do this. So here's Coach Michelle, just a little bit about by actually, if you could go ahead and introduce yourself, Coach Michelle, so that people know who you are.
Yeah, so I'm Michelle. I'm a second year mechanical engineering major at MIT. I went to high school in California, and so I'm like from that area, but now I live here in Boston.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did a lot of like robotics in high school and engineering programs in high school, and so that's
Mhm.
kind of why I wanted to go to MIT.
Excellent. So, Michelle, I was just curious for you. Um, now, did you go on a number of interviews, or was just this one with MIT? Like, was there a number of them, or did you just do the one?
Yeah, so for me, I got into MIT early, and so after that, I kind of slacked off on the rest of my applications. So I
Okay.
really only did an MIT interview,
Okay.
but I would imagine that it's pretty similar across other
Mhm.
interviews.
Yeah, yeah. So, I know that I asked you, in preparing, was there anything with respect to the MIT interview that how long did it take you to prepare? What did you do for your preparation?
I don't think it takes that long to be prepared. I think
Hmm.
just trying to understand the culture at MIT, and so specifically for MIT, there's some things that I think the school encompasses with a lot of their students, which is this like risk taker attitude,
Mm.
curiosity, I feel like it's less technical than you think it is and more about personality traits that they're looking for,
Wow.
and that's kind of what I thought about during my interview, like, how do I wanna portray myself? What
Okay.
aspects of myself do I think best align with what this school typically
Yeah.
sees, and how can
Uh-huh.
I play towards those traits?
So let me ask you this because you talked about the risk taking, which I didn't even know for MIT. Um, was that something that you found out in the research that you were doing that they were more geared towards that and that's what you're looking for, or was that something that you found out during the interview?
I think it was something that I kind of found out before just from what people were talking about. I
Hmm.
think one of the biggest things around a lot of engineering schools and MIT is trying to get over your fear of failure. Engineering, you're
Mm,
gonna fail, things are not gonna work, and so
right.
recognizing that you're gonna fail and still taking that leap, taking that initiative is important to them, and so I kind of thought about that when I was answering my question.
Wow. Okay. So let me ask you this. Of course, we talked about some typical questions, like tell me about yourself and that. Do you can you kind of recall the type of questions that you were asked, and was there any of those curveballs that we talked about that you were like, "Ooh, I didn't prepare for that one."
I don't really remember there being any curveballs, but for my
Okay.
interview, she kind
Okay.
of just asked that first question that almost everyone will ask, which is just like, tell me about yourself.
Right.
And I really tried to not ramble. That's something that I recognize that I do sometimes. So trying to keep my list, like, I want to talk about these things that I think best represent me and focusing on those three things. And so once
Mhm.
I told her those things, the rest of her questions were kind of based off of my responses, which I think is
Oh,
good, like, instead of them leading the interview, it's you leading the interview almost, and so, like,
right.
one thing that I like to think about is when you're having a conversation with a new person, when a conversation is awkward, you'll start asking, like, a bunch of random questions, like, "Oh, where are you from? Oh, how is how was this high school that you go to?" And you're, like, pushing questions out, like, trying to pull information out of them, rather than,
Mhm.
like, in an engaging conversation, you're staying on one topic and getting more in depth and asking each other questions about that topic, and so
Right.
I recognize that in my interview, it was more like that, and so I took that as, like, kind of a good sign.
Good. Yeah, that there was a kind of a back and forth. You were feeding off of each other, and so which again, that's how a conversation is, right? I mean, a conversation is just not set things and you do this. It's you're feeding off of one another that you hear something, then they hear something, and you ask questions back and forth, right? Cool.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
so how long did the interview last for you?
I think it was around an hour,
An hour.
if I
Okay.
remember.
An hour. And did it seem like an hour or was it more of, wow, this went really fast?
I think it definitely went by fast. I part of the reason why I don't remember the questions, I think, is because I was just so in the moment, like, adrenaline
Sure.
rushing through me, and so I didn't really think about the interview a lot, or I couldn't think about it a lot, it just went by
Mhm.
so fast. And I
Yeah.
will say that the person that was interviewing me was, like, on the younger side, and so
Okay.
she was a lot more up to date with, like, trendier topics in STEM,
Mm.
and so talking with her was a lot easier, whereas I know I've talked to some other people here, and their interviewers are a lot older, and so they have this very traditional sense of engineering. So I think
Mm.
I kind of got lucky, but you have to be able to play on both sides.
Sure. And you have to adapt because you have to know.
Right.
I'm curious is that did they ask you did and I don't know if you remember, but did they ask you about, you know, things that you were passionate about or maybe insights about engineering or that kind I mean, did they actually ask you about those kind of questions?
Yeah, so weirdly enough, the girl that interviewed me was from a nearby area. So I'm from like Roland Heights area, and
Mhm.
she's from Walnut area, which is like
Oh
20,
my
30
gosh, it's right
minutes
next to each
away.
other. Yeah.
Super close. Yeah. And so her I talked a lot about my robotics team because I was really involved in that, and I talked about
Okay.
stuff I did and how I wanted to build on the team, and she was actually in the same kind of robotics competition, so that was something that we
Mm.
talked about a lot. I don't know, there was just some things that we did that were similar that it was
Okay.
easy to talk about things, which I think MIT did on purpose, like, they try and pair you up with someone that you can have a conversation with.
Right. So I'm curious, what were some of the questions, or if you remember, what are some of the questions that you may have asked, or maybe if you think about it, what would be important questions that you would ask the interviewer?
Some questions that I think a lot of people really like is when they can recount on their experience. So, like, what was a really impactful class for you that you definitely recommend
Mm,
me taking, or a
right.
class that a lot of your friends talk about?
Got it.
Also, something at MIT here is called like hacking, where you kind of do a couple rebellious things. And I was like, what kind of hacking things have you done? Or is that popular? Or is
Sure.
that just a myth? And so, like, kind of being friendly and making jokes or being playful while also keeping it kind of professional
Right.
and
Right.
connected to the school.
Cool. Cool. So overall, with respect to the interview itself, what was your overall impression? Like, how did you, when you were done, how did you feel? What did you think about it?
Honestly, I remember just being glad that it was over because I was so nervous about it. I don't think I felt a specific way about it. Like, in the moment, I don't think I was like, "That was a good interview," or "That was a bad
Hmm.
interview." I was kind of just like, "It's done." And in hindsight, I think now I can say that it was probably a good interview because I got into the school, so they must have
Sure.
connected with me in some way. But I
Sure.
like, in the moment after, I was like, "I have no idea how that went."
Now, during where you probably you said it already, but were you nervous? Like really, really
Definitely. I
nervous, or
think
was it just kind of like a
it's
regular
so
nervous?
normal. Yeah, I was really nervous. I've
Okay.
never and I don't think it's common for a lot of high school students to have practice with interviews
No,
in
it's
any
not.
setting. Like, you'll do
Hmm.
presentations and
Sure.
but that's really it. So an interview feels so awkward at first, meeting someone for the first
Mm,
time, like, all of it was very unfamiliar with me, and I don't think that I'm someone that has very intense energy. I don't think that I come off as very
okay.
um, extroverted, so I was definitely nervous for it, but I think recognizing that it was just one part of my entire application and trying not to put too much weight on it helped me
Okay.
think, like, just try and be yourself as much as possible. They'll like you
Right.
or they won't like you, and that's it. That's, like, all you can really control.
Yeah, and that's a really great point is that, and with anything, you have to just make sure is whatever you have control over. You don't have control over the interviewer, you don't have control over of the environment or what's going to happen or so, but you do have control over your emotions and how you can act and react, right?
Yeah.
So what is maybe one or two tips that you would give to, let's say you have these people who are watching now, and let's say they're and there's a student that's preparing for their famous interview. What would you recommend to them?
So one thing that I know that I struggled with, like this was one of my weaknesses, especially in conversation, is I don't like having awkward spaces of silence. So I tend to ramble. And so I know that I'm a rambler. And that was something that I was like, I cannot ramble. And so what I did was
Okay.
I made a list of things that I wanted to make sure I had talked about in the interview, whether it was like
Ooh.
extracurriculars or personal traits of mine or things that I was interested about in the school. I like, had that list down and I used it as an outline when answering
Hmm.
questions to make sure that whatever I had written on my paper, hopefully they had written in their notes. Like, hopefully it matched up and they got that energy from me. And in that way, I was rambling less because I knew what I needed to talk about and not
Awesome.
getting as off task. And that was really helpful for me.
Okay. That's amazing. Great. Any other tips? Anything else you can think of?
I can't really think of anything. I guess with like curveball questions, sometimes they'll have a lot of sample questions online.
Yeah.
But besides that, I don't there's no way to prepare for a curveball question, you kind of just have to do
Yeah,
the
you
best that you
can.
can.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen questions like, who's your favorite author, or what's the latest book that you've
Mhm.
read, or if you were stranded on an island and you only can take one thing. I mean, there was some very odd interview questions I've had yeah, you just have to, again, just have to relax, think about it. Um, great, great tip about having notes in front of you, because that's okay. And even especially whether it's in person or online, online, of course, it's easy because just be right in front of you. In person, as I mentioned, if you have a portfolio, you just have it in your portfolio and you're gonna, and that's fair. It's fair to have pre-notes. The interview is going to be fine with that. One thing that I always have done in the past is, that tell me about yourself. Um, I always kind of think of, and this is kind of old school. I don't know if you guys have ever seen like those file drawers. I don't know if you ever seen file drawers, just or even clothing drawers or whatever. I always think about those drawers and that each drawer represents something like what you've done in school, what your activities are, what your future goals are. And so when I think about that, when I go through and I'd say, tell me about yourself, I'm opening that drawer and I'm taking out what I'm going to talk to them about. And the big thing this is one big thing for everybody that's on the line here is to really prepare for that tell me about yourself. And I call it the 30 or 60-second commercial. It's as if you walk into an elevator and the person that you've always wanted to meet, okay, and they say, "Oh, hey Michelle, so tell me about yourself." And you have 60 seconds to impress them. What are you going to tell them? And that's where I like to compartmentalize these things and say, okay, you want to talk about maybe who you are, how old you are, maybe, or what school you've gone to, or, maybe you're a sophomore, I'm a junior, this and that. You want to talk about, I'm studying this right now. I'm planning to be a blah, blah, blah. And my dreams are to be this, and that's just really quickly so that they can get a good, quick idea of who you are. And so, I highly, highly suggest that everyone online, figure out what your 30 or 60-second commercial is. So because you never know who you're going to meet, especially if you're going to do an interview. So amazing stuff, Michelle. I really, really appreciate you being on the line with us. I'm going to open this up. I don't know if people have questions here, but I would love it to see if you guys can give us some questions, either on the chat or there is the Q&A. So if you, I do actually, there's looks like there's a question here. Okay. How long after you applied did MIT contact you for an interview? Did you have a couple of days or weeks advance notice to prepare? That's one question.
Yeah, so I think for me, I probably got contacted around 3 weeks after I turned in my application, I wanna say around that time,
Hmm.
and they were kind of like, "When are you free to do the interview?" And I chose to do it earlier rather than, like, waiting a couple weeks because
Right.
I think you wanna get it over with, and nothing
Yeah.
is really gonna change. As long as you feel well enough prepared, nothing is
Sure.
gonna change in a couple weeks. And
Sure.
also for MIT, I'm pretty sure everyone gets an interview, like,
Yep.
MIT offers interview opportunities for everyone. That's not for all Ivy Leagues or all colleges,
Right.
but so, like, if you get an interview, don't take that as like a, "I'm in," like, my foot is in the door.
Right.
Take it as like a, "How do I wanna present myself?"
Yeah, great, great point. I know, for example, like Stanford does that. And actually on the I was going to ask you that on the application, there's normally a little checkbox saying if you had a chance to interview with us, would you like that opportunity? And I always tell people to select yes. Now, unless you are the kind of person that simply cannot talk in front of people, that just even that I like kind of say, oh, you really need to tell them. But if you have an opportunity, take it. Any opportunity you can to show them who you are. You know, there's hundreds of thousands of students applying to these schools. And if there's even a little bit that's going to, put you over the edge and get you there, I always say yes. So, okay. Another
Yeah.
question. Sorry, you had something else, Michelle? Oh,
No, no,
okay.
I agree with you.
Okay. Are you more likely to receive an interview if you apply early versus regular cycle? Okay, well, I don't know if you want to answer. I can answer that too. I mean, either
I think you
way,
should answer.
yeah, it's either way because there, as you mentioned, Michelle, is that if whether you go regular or early, they normally uh, offer interviews for everybody. Okay. I think a lot of people think that, and you were right on, is saying is, oh my God, I got an interview. I'm in. This is the last part. It really isn't. Just it's just really part of the interview process. I'm sorry, the application process, and it's just one aspect. So that's why, you stay patient, stay calm. Don't think it's the end all be all. Even if you didn't do well on it, doesn't mean that you're not going to make it in, or make it in either way. So, okay. Um, Anybody else on the line? Does anyone else have a question? Anyone else have a question? Oh, here, look at this. After interviewing, do you still hear back with a decision on the regular date? I don't know what that, I think, are you saying after, do you still hear back with a decision? I assume your application will, you will hear a decision either way. I mean, whether you're checking on the website or whether they send you a notice, you still get a decision. I don't know what that means. Do you still hear back with a
Yeah.
decision on the regular date?
I think you know how there's I don't know, when is it, like, sometime in January or February where all
Oh,
the
yes,
colleges
I
have
see.
yeah, you don't hear back earlier after your interview unless that college
No,
is, like, a rolling admissions, then maybe it's
correct.
different,
Exactly.
but typically, it's just you hear with everyone else, so the interview doesn't
Exactly.
it's not
Right.
an end all be all.
That's right. The interview doesn't expedite your decision making process. Again, unless you went early action, early decision, then yes, but the interview doesn't have that influence of having you here earlier. Okay. Any other questions from the gallery? Those are great questions. Good job. It was an anonymous attendee, but so nice job, everyone. All right. Well, I hope everyone, if you could do me a favor, I always like to see, was this helpful? If you could, either give me a thumbs up or a heart. Would love to know if this was okay. See, that's what it is because I love the affirmation. So, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I know that you have uh, you have means or other choices that you have that you can take, but you choose to join us. Coach Michelle, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. Your insights were amazing. Wish you so much luck, of course, in at school there. And for everybody else on the line, remember we're doing these trainings every day, every weekday. So please join us because I think we have a lot of great information for you. Thanks again for joining us, and we will see you next Tuesday. All right. So thanks a lot, everyone. We'll talk to you later. Take it easy. Bye bye.